Okay, Rao, are you ready to give the tech update?
Yes, I am. All right, thank you, Ian. So welcome to Community Update 155 and a more sane administration in the White House. So we are in Epoch 3. All mainnet and testnet nodes are running 0.10.0 version. That's the last finalized state version. And mainnet has 30 nodes, so there has not been a whole lot of change there. There is I did mention that there is a slow daily degradation where we're watching, seems like some kind of a garbage collection not being complete or something like that, but that's still under investigation as we speak. In terms of development, we have made very good progress on block merge. The first few PRs are in for block merge. And the team is reviewing the PRs. NetZipper has started testing on DevNet, and we had to, and I think just a few minutes ago, Ian was done provisioning a monster machine with 224 CPUs. You don't really need that kind of CPUs. Basically, just for the ease of testing, what we're trying to do is run all the validators on the same machine, because it's easier to just start, measure, and then shut down the machine rather than having to do that with 10 or 20 machines. So we're trying to understand the, specifically we're trying to understand with block merge the horizontal scaling, degree of horizontal scaling with the network. Which is basically to say, does the network throughput increase as we add more nodes to the network? And if so, by how much? That's basically one of the things that we're trying to understand, what that equation or the curve looks like as we add more nodes. And that's the reason why we need more CPUs. And we could also run it across multiple machines with many CPUs. Which is the other thing we will do later on, just to understand the network latency side of that. Because right now, the way we're trying to do it all on the same machine, just for the ease of testing. And then later on, we'll do it across multiple machines, perhaps in different regions, to understand how that behaves with network latency. So that's where we are. But the good news is the code is working and we're able to run tests. In parallel, the team is reviewing the PRs. So at some point, we should have a version of this available on the testnet. This is, of course, the very first release of block merge. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. And I listed here 3 categories of work that needs to be done. One is to identify more of the non-conflicting cases and be able to resolve them and merge them automatically. That's one part of that, which is basically extending the scope of automated block merge without requiring a replay. So that's one part. Second part is optimizations in whatever we're doing. At the moment, we're not too focused on that yet. But there are ways to, say, for example, do certain things in cache or otherwise that will increase the speed of merging the blocks. So there's that, and there are other optimizations also available. So that's another stream of work, if you would, that we'll be doing in future. And then making block merge operational for the mainnet, which then means looking at all the other pieces and resolving any bugs in the actual results that we're seeing after the block merge, whether they be in Casper or some other place. We need to make sure that everything all works. So that's a tedious but absolutely necessary work to be done before we can operationalize this on the mainnet. So that's some of the work that needs to be done with block merge. And then as we do this, there'll be other optimizations and bug fixing and all that we need to do in the rest of the system, rest of the code base. So that's where we are. So that's a substantial progress on block merge. And like I said before, we'll be doing releases in small releases for the block merge. And then we eventually will have all the pieces in there. But whatever is working, we should be able to keep moving to the mainnet after being vetted on the testnet for a period of time. I think that's the main part of the report today. There's nothing particularly new in the dependencies, and I had already spoken to Rolang 1.1, and I mentioned that to operationalize that, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. So I want to speak to what the roadmap looks like for the near future. So we're looking at first quarter focus on block merge and operationalizing it. And second quarter is updating the POS contract and enabling external validators. Third quarter is operationalizing Rolang 1.1. And then the fourth quarter, we're looking at sharding and namespaces in that order. So if we, I mean, depending on some of the things that we're doing in block merge and the fact that most of the transactions, meaning the payment type of things, we may be able to make them go faster by recognizing the fact that, you know, deposits, for example, are commutative and they don't conflict. So as we do those things, the need for sharding and all that would be a little bit reduced. So that's why sharding is kind of moved to the later part of the year. But I think overall, the rest of it, much of this, and I guess, I mean, maybe I don't recall now if Rolang 1.1 was really, I don't think, committed as part of the Mercury release. Maybe Greg can correct me on that. But so you're getting Mercury Plus or Mercury with this schedule is what you're looking at. And I'm going to be revising I have revised the milestone dates on the GitHub somewhat, but there'll be some more revisions to it. I have not gotten around to that, but I'll take care of that later. So that's, I think, all I wanted to say for today. Oh, on the development side of things. In terms of developer engagement, researcher engagement, hackathon, etc., Greg and Steve Ross Talbot and the development team will be participating in half-day workshops with some process algebra folks in the UK, February 4th and February 11th. So basically, it's to really engage that community and validate and perhaps enhance what we're doing is the goal of that. And that should give us nice external validation of the work or improvements thereof to what we're doing. And then the hackathon is scheduled for sometime in March. We have not put a schedule down yet for that. What we are, this might even slip into, say, second quarter. Basically, what we want to do is, once block merge is in place, first of all, I think it should be attractive to developers to work on the platform. And then there is some degree of explanation, education, marketing, whatever you want to call it, of the developer community at that point in time, once we make more progress in block merge, to be able to see their engagement with the increase their engagement with the platform, educate them so that they're ready enough for a hackathon at some point in the future. So that might slip a little bit from March to, say, April or sometime in the second quarter. But as of now, we're trying to see if we could run it towards the end of March. It's a balance between, I mean, it's never the platform is going to continuously improve. So we don't want to put the development, push out the development, developer engagement too far out, but at the same time, you want to engage them too early and frustrate them also. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, obviously, people can develop on the platform as we stand because we have the DAPI, we have the RVote, we have the COVID passport, and a bunch of other applications, and the liquid democracy that people have developed. So it's ready for development. But we also want to do some marketing with the advantages so that people are more motivated to continue to work with the platform. So that's the balance there. I think that's about all I want to say. Are there any questions, comments on what I said? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Rao. That was a good update. Yeah, in fact, this week's Casper, we looked in detail at merge that involves value domains with commutative operations. So in particular, our conflict detection at the first level works just on channels, not what's inside the channels. But you can go further looking at the what's inside the channels if you know that what's being stored in a channel is a value from a domain where you have commutative operations. So that it would include the integers with addition or the integers with multiplication, strings, string concatenation. Oh, sorry, not concatenation. Set union. Things like that. Those are examples where you have a value domain that supports some commutative operations, and so you can do a block merge. If you want to get more details on that, you can tune into this week's Casper stand-up. And so with that, let me just go ahead and turn it over to Daryl, and then we can talk about some other things. Daryl, are you ready for the community in review?
Yep. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. All right. So here is the week in review for Thursday, the 14th to today, Wednesday, the 20th. On Thursday, the dApp Developer Working Group discussed the promotion of developing dApps on RChain and reasons for choosing RChain. On Friday at the Climate Coordination Call, we had John Grant join us. And he had some really fascinating ideas. I still haven't finished editing it, so when I get it up, I encourage checking it out. We discussed financial risk in the agricultural market due to climate change, as well as new irrigation data app called OpenET. And we discussed public governance and modern social media. On Monday at Casper Stand-Up, this week's Casper Stand-Up covered block merge for commutative operations, such as deposits on values in channels. Also on Monday, at the RDev member co-op planning, they considered positions, Sean as a potential CFO, and discussed whether it will be a co-op. On Tuesday, yesterday, the Communications Working Group, we discussed ways to explain concurrency to a layperson and the different things we can do now to get our ducks in a row in prep for a potential outside publicist to help get the word out about block merge when it arrives in Q1. And that brings us to, oh no, we had this morning at the RChain Active member hangout, our beloved member, Gary Coulter, was back. And he's looking great after surgery. So it was exciting to see him back and at it. And I gave some background on my perspective on the origins of the SPV and where it is now with Dazzle. And that brings us to now. So back to you, Greg. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Daryl. Any questions for Daryl? Okie doke. All right. So we have lots and lots of updates for members for the closed door session. A lot of good updates. So I'm happy to speak to those this Friday. So I would encourage folks who are interested to attend that session. But yeah, we've had a lot of good engagement, but from several different corners, but I can't speak to that in this session. So I do encourage folks who are interested in the co-op business to attend the Friday session. Trying to think what else we have that we can talk about in the open session. So we had a good board meeting yesterday. Again, all of the board details have to go to the closed door session. So I think that's about it for what we can say in the open session.
Were you going to speak to the RVote relative to how it could be useful, or is that not on the?
I think we've spoken many times about how RVote can be useful to this particular crowd.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can tell the story again. I mean, I
that's
think
fine. I mean, I think everybody that's here understands it, but I thought you were going to speak to that in a broader context of if governments and can begin to use that, the impact that RVote could have. But that's fine if that's.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think everyone here who's probably breathing a heavy sigh of relief that the inauguration went off without any violence in the state capitals, and who is still dealing with the shock of the violence that happened on our federal capital, understands that if we had a cryptographically secure voting mechanism where citizens could vote within the safety of their own home, and they could verify for themselves the results of the elections, immediately upon the close of the election, that they would, recognize that the lie that was fomented by the outgoing administration and many of the Republican Party senators and congressional representatives, that lie could not have been promulgated, and because it couldn't have been promulgated, the likelihood of the violent outcomes that we saw would be dramatically reduced. So that part of it is, I think, well worth reflecting on when we think about voting systems for the U.S. going forward. Of course, there are lots of practical wins. Almost certainly, the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that go into the support of the state election systems would be dramatically reduced. There'd be no printed paper ballots. There would be no need for drop box receptacles, and a wide range of infrastructure would simply just evaporate and disappear if we had such a system. The other thing that is very important, I think, when we think about these kinds of applications, is that from me describing the algorithm to the community building a viable implementation that the co-op could use was really just a few short weeks. I think it was about 6 weeks in total. And that was not 6 full-time weeks. It was 8 calendar weeks, but nobody was working full-time on this application. So getting to this high functioning kind of system is a very short thing that can be done as a community effort. So the promise of RChain to facilitates self-assembly and self-coordination is realized and fulfilled in applications like RVote, and likewise with the COVID passport. Again, that was done within a few short days from the time I sort of described the communication flow and the basics of the protocol to the point where we had a prototype that was done, sort of without anyone in charge. There were many stakeholders. The work came together. So again, it fosters self-organization towards applications that have real and tangible value for society at large right now. I think everything that we've said about RChain is coming true, from the performance and the throughput to the and scalability to its potential and promise for self-organization. All of that is being manifest and manifest in a very short period of time, from just about 12 months ago when we launched mainnet to now. We're beginning to see the kinds of things that we have been talking about for a very long time. That I think is really the essence of the RChain story. So any questions or comments about that? Raul, your thoughts? Ian, your thoughts? Daryl, your thoughts?
What was the phrase that you said? Self-coordination, or there was another phrase? I was just writing something down.
I said self-organization.
Self-organization, right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that some of the European countries seem to be moving in this direction already. I don't remember if it was Sweden or Switzerland, but one of them had a RFP out back in December, I believe, for this kind of voting that's cryptographically protected. So I think especially for smaller countries with high education and a good network infrastructure, this would be a very natural thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the kind of like the history of mistrust of digital tools, it's not just this election. With this election, you have Dominion challenging via lawsuits people who made claims about the flaws in their technology. Back in the Bush years, I remember from the other side of the political arena, you had Bev Harris with her black box voting investigations on distrust of these voting machines. I'm just kind of curious to if we were to realistically try to model a solution in the next 4 years that involves blockchain solutions, how people could accuse it of being gamed or how it could be gamed. So it's an interesting thought. Like, what would be the weaknesses in such a system?
Well, I mean, the biggest weakness is the map from ID to rev address. So every electoral system has to have a voter registration mechanism. No matter what there's no way around that. You have to have a voter registration mechanism. So right. you have to sort of prove to some degree of certainty that you are who you say you are, and then that identity will be assigned to a identifier, a number, an address, whatever, inside the system. And so that part is not a weakness specific to RChain's
Right.
RVote. It's a vulnerability that every election system has.
And there's like I think a lot of examples in just in the like say the last 5 years of my life where I've been able to log into my bank account with my phone and using two-factor authentication. There's some really great tools now that weren't even there, certainly not 10 years ago, where you can kind of really verify the person. And I agree, like it's nothing to do with RChain, but I'm just saying like addressing that issue to me seems like it's something that's reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has to be reasonable because otherwise you couldn't conduct elections today. So,
yeah.
So there are voter registration systems, right? And that was the principal attack. One of the principal attacks that Rudy Giuliani and others tried to levy against the existing state systems. And dead people voted. people who are not residents in your state voted. Blah blah blah. Right. So they attacked the voter registration vector, and it's fairly easy to shore that up, largely because that's been a known vector of attack for a long time now. And that whatever mechanism is used today can be composed with a system like RVote. So if you're happy with the voter registration system, for example, in Washington State, if you're satisfied that the voter registration mechanism is safe and secure, then you can utilize that mechanism in conjunction with RVote to sign a voter registration and a rev address. But once you're at the level of rev address, the attacks are very difficult. I would actually love to see a hacker find a vector of attack.
Yeah, and the whole advantage, of course, is just the public viewability of it. Like once you get past those other hurdles and you actually vote, you can look at your vote and you can prove that you voted, and
Sure.
You can
prove that the ballot you cast, what was submitted to the system, is in fact the ballot you cast. So that part is provable, and Dan Connolly gives a nice video about that.
Yeah, so it's almost like the solution that any blockchain solution comes up with, ideally RChain, solves is the black box voting, the Dominion machines, these machines owned by some kind of company that the conspiracy theorists say are controlled by a foreign country, or those kinds of questions won't be there anymore.
No, that's not the only question that it solves. Another question that it solves that is really important is that it's modular with respect to the counting. So the system accumulates the votes, and that accumulation is on the chain for anyone to tally. Anyone who can script or do whatever, if they don't believe in the code of the state-run scripts, they can write their own scripts and come up with the tally, and then they can compare that tally against whatever the states might do, or whatever the jurisdiction might do. So the point there is that they would be able to know the results without knowing who individually voted how.
Right.
And they could do that on their own. So that would completely nip in the bud any kind of voter fraud claims. So if you are satisfied with the voter registration, you can prove to yourself that the middle bit, which is RVote, is safe and secure. And once you have those two pieces, then there's no longer any voter fraud because anyone can walk up to the public chain and say, give me the tally. And they can either use code that they trust or they can write code that will calculate the tally. And so then there's no possibility for Giuliani or a Senator Hawley or anyone to make any kind of noise about fraud. That becomes impossible.
Yeah, because like the other one that Trump was talking about months beforehand was the whole mail-in voting concept, even though that's how he voted. But so the idea that you can just mail in somebody and your brother and your neighbor and vote for them, and all these kinds of ideas would also have to be addressed, and that gets into again what you're saying, like how the person is registered to vote part. Like,
yeah, that's correct. But for me, we're at the very beginning of what you can do with RChain. The things that that we've done with RVote and the COVID passport are really just they're not even warm-up exercises for the kinds of things you can do with RChain. And again, I want to keep emphasizing that those were doable without anybody being in charge. They were done as community efforts. And this is what I keep saying about self-organization. Communities around the globe can use RChain to craft governance solutions, credential solutions, identity solutions, and a whole host of other kinds of coordination solutions with RChain. And they can do it themselves. They do not have to wait for governments or corporations or NGOs to get their act together with respect to climate change. They can take action now.
Mic drop.
Yeah. That was a conversation killer.
I'm actually just taking notes is what I'm doing, but that was great. Greg, thank you so much.
Oh no, it's my pleasure.
Feeling
I really
very inspired today.
Yeah, well, it's a day to be inspired.
Indeed.
The U.S. has pulled itself out of a terrible tailspin.
I have a question. How will you create like anonymous voting on top of RChain? I mean, the thing about the voting system that's currently in place. I mean, you can vote anonymously. Yeah, we suppose you vote anonymously. So no one, so the votes are destroyed. So how would you do the same thing with RVote?
So again, the aim was not to provide anonymous voting, and the reason is clear. We have to have proof come any sort of knock at the door from the SEC or the DFI or the CFTC or any of these regulatory bodies that the membership has governance say. And if we cannot prove that it was members that voted because all the voting was anonymous, then we have a problem. So our aims were not anonymous voting. Now, it could be that another community wants anonymous voting, but once you have anonymous voting, you have a real problem. And the problem is, does the party who voted have a right to participate in this election? So, for example, with anonymous voting, a bunch of Chinese nationals could vote in the US elections. Is that what you want?
That's not what I mean. I mean, point. I mean, you can do anonymous voting, but the thing is, like, if you actually have granted those permissions to, like, capabilities to vote, so the person can vote anonymously, not anonymous that you don't know who that person is, but you don't know what the person voted for. That's the sort of anonymity I'm talking about. More like privacy.
Yeah, I mean, so for that, I think that there will come solutions. The nice thing is that RVote is completely modular, and so if there is a way to grant the ballot capability, so we can generate ballot capabilities, and if there's a way to grant the ballot capability to a party anonymously, that solution can be composed with RVote. So I think you were working towards a system that could do that. And if when and if that system becomes open source so that people can review the source, then it's perfectly reasonable to compose it in with the next version of RVote. I would vote for that. I think in general though, what people will demand of any component like that is that we can see all the code. That's exactly the issue that people have with the Dominion systems. They're closed source systems, and so people become paranoid and worried that the Dominion boxes are flipping votes or doing all kinds of nefarious things. So we to be better than that kind of thing, we have to provide, we have to make sure that all code is inspectable by the community. So anyone who has a concern can look at the code and say, okay, this is what it's doing. I feel more comfortable, more confident. Now, obviously, looking at code is not going to be an answer to what does this thing actually do, but it's more of a psychological kind of assurance. People need to be able to see the code for themselves, but it is many questions about how a piece of code functions will be halting hard, such as which means the answer is impossible. Such as, will this code call this subroutine? That's halting hard. So just because something is open source doesn't solve all problems, but it does. It does provide assurances for many members of the community. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up because if we're gonna compare it to the voting system that's gonna be used on masses, I mean, it still has ways to go.
Well,
if you want to deploy
to date, it is not the case that, the election systems do not guarantee that the vote talliers cannot see how people voted. That is not a property that is guaranteed by the state election systems in the United States. And I'm very doubtful that that's the case, for example, in Switzerland or Iberia or Guangzhou, China. I doubt very seriously that property is one that is guaranteed by the existing systems. But it is a nice system to have in the future. Nice property to have in the future.
Yeah, if RVote had that, I mean, you could probably deploy it and use it already in masses. If you could actually vote privately, so no one can see your vote. And if you got KYC'd, then it's more safe to know you have the right to vote. So that you don't have actually dead people voting and stuff. That's not gonna be possible unless someone.
I don't believe that any of these solutions are going to be deployed en masse until there's a much bigger cultural acceptance of these kinds of solutions. I think that there's going to have to be a fairly large debate and dialogue within legislative bodies, bringing them up to speed on what's possible technologically. So we're very, very far ahead of what the legislators are able to grok currently. So there will have to be this long investigation and probing of what a system like RVote can do. And then at that point, I'm sure there will be a more refined debate about this kind of functional anonymity that you're describing. But again, the point is that as an interested community member, you were able to put together a system which could be composed with RVote if we took the time. And this is what I'm talking about, is that the community can self-organize. Someone can give voice to, I think we need to have this property of our system. And you can not only talk about it, you can show us. And then the community as a community can evaluate the different solutions and go forward with what's going to work in which timeframes. That is what I'm talking about with respect to RChain and self-organization.
I love it. I just noticed that there's a link in the chat that Lilia posted. If anybody's interested in exploring some of these ideas more, it's the headline is, "Could Estonia be the model for secure online voting?" So I'm just kind of skimming through the article now. It's definitely some interesting. It's an interview. There's some interesting questions and answers here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I have made no secret that I believe that the current jurisdictional models are not going to cut it as we begin to approach real climate change solutions. I apologize and up front, but it's not, I mean, like, it is fairly clear that if we burned down the Amazon today, all of the ecosystems in the planet are most likely to fail. There's an extremely high likelihood that we would have catastrophic failure of the vast, you know, of the life-sustaining ecosystems. So the idea that one jurisdiction has control over all life on Earth is probably not cool. So we're going to have to look at local global arrangements that are different than they are now with respect to climate change. I hate to be so stark and crass about it, but I think this is inescapable. And you know, the geopolitical maps from the 20th century no longer apply. And so we're going to have to have mechanisms that allow for different kinds of community governance. And that's another reason why RChain's architecture is the way it is. But I'm sure that gets me labeled as persona non grata if anyone were actually listening to our conversations.
Well, I'm still kind of at this current state in our evolution as a species. I do give credence to governmental collectives, things like the United Nations, and today, hopefully, it looks like the U.S. is gonna rejoin the Climate Accord. I think that you know, what you're talking about kind of has to involve something like that at some level, at least, of where countries all gather together and discuss their contributions to CO2 levels and how they can mitigate them versus other countries, and coordinating that information, I think, is still essential. So it's nice to know that today, on this very date that we're speaking, we are rejoining that accord. In my opinion, I think that's a good thing.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think we're going to need, we can't just like drop nation state constructs and move to something better overnight. I think there's going to have to be a lot of collaboration and coordination amongst nation states, but eventually I can't see a way out of redrawing the jurisdictional maps. I don't think it's going to work the way it's carved up to date.
Right.
Coolio, any other questions, comments from the community? Awesome. Well, thanks to all. Please stay safe, and we will. I'm looking forward to seeing many of you. Oh wait, what was the comment there? I missed it. There was this comment in the chat.
It's Tom. Okay, so Tom actually.
Just hope it won't be a borderless dystopia with no escape.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. I don't like science fiction movie.
Well, you gotta work, go work with the lawn so that you can expand your borders and get to Mars or Proxima Centauri
or Elysium, where you've got this space station floating above Earth with all the rich people.
There you go. Exactly. So you can expand your borders. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Ciao, ciao.